Alrighty then. Hey folks, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today with me is Ian Simmons from Kicking the Seat podcast. Ian, thanks for coming on. You just told me moments ago that you didn't see the Majestic, and well, I think a lot of people didn't see the Majestic, and it was like one of those movies that just randomly came up in a conversation. I don't remember how it came up, but yeah.
What were we talking about? Oh, you see, this is the problem with getting old is I forget what I had for lunch today. But it was during a recent movie conversation that we were having, and I think you brought it up to me in the
Yeah.
context of something else. I'm like, oh, I've never seen that movie, and so we made a plan to talk about it, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, to clarify, I have seen the film, but I hadn't seen it before today. So yeah, for 24 years, I've wondered what is that Majestic movie. Not that I think about it often, but yeah, here we are.
Oh, I thought it was older than 24. I don't know.
2001.
1, so 27? I think. I don't know. It could be, or I'm not sure.
No, because
Okay.
that's the backwards math. Because
Ah,
we're not quite at the next year will be the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which is one of
ah.
the reasons I think this movie did not do so well because it came out
Yeah.
December 12th of that year. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think folks were ready for kind of chintzy, retroactive, heartwarming fare
Yeah.
after one of the darkest moments in American history.
Yeah. Exactly. It had that, and then it also reflected on one of our darkest moments with the Red Scare. And it was kind of it was like a patriotic yet like political film, and it was coming during a time when people wanted to have a lot of unity. And this movie was like, well, this is our freedom of speech, and these are the people trying to take it away. And it's like that wasn't quite the message I think audiences were levitating towards at that time. But I saw it recently. The last time I saw it was in 2001 in the theater.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So for me, I always was afraid to revisit it because I know it got terrible reviews and that it was basically like an Oscar bait film. And when I saw it, I really liked it a lot. And then I rewatched it and I was afraid to rewatch it because I was afraid I didn't like it. And I didn't. I thought this movie was like the worst kind of Hollywood schlock where you can predict exactly what's going to happen from the first frame of the movie to the last frame of the movie. Like, for instance, and I'll throw up the spoilers banner when uh, Pete is giving his big testimony before Congress, and he basically is telling them that he has the protection of freedom of speech, blah blah blah. He's doing the whole thing where they're playing the cliche like, I wish I was like this person, but I'm not. And I just started rolling my eyes. I have a little clip to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. This is a spoiler warning for a movie you'll probably never see that I'm not even recommending. So let's take a look.
But it occurs to me that there's a bigger issue here today than whether or not I'm a communist.
Bigger issue? Mr. Appleton, there is no bigger issue.
See, I'm not like Luke Trimble. The thing is, I can't help wondering what he'd say if he were standing here right now. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion.
Mr. Appleton, you're out of order,
Congress shall make no law respecting...
The chamber will come to order, Mr. Appleton. The witness will resume his seat. You are not excused, sir. You will resume your seat.
All right, I had to cut it short because I got the points. But you could just see it's just a collection of cliches put together in one movie. Like, this is one of those movies where I don't like to use the word cliche because you could use that for like everything. But it feels like this movie is entirely made of that. And I understand the heart and the soul to it, but it didn't click with me. But Ian, this is your first time seeing it. What are your thoughts?
Complete opposite opinion. I
Yeah.
love this movie. I think it's great. I understand what you're saying, but I don't accept it with this one because this is not a cynical film. This is
Mm-hmm.
a movie that was made with a lot of heart and passion and artistry. And I'm biased because I can say that because I know Frank Darabont's other work. I mean, this is the
Mm-hmm.
guy who made The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. He would go on to make The Walking Dead. Um, and other projects. I mean, this movie has like all of his stable of character actors in it, which was great. Yeah, I think this was the problem with this movie, if there is one, is it was just about a few years ahead of its time.
Mm,
I think if this had come out in 2004, it would have resonated because there were a lot more questions about freedom of speech and government inquiry. If this were to come out today, I think people would be clamoring for something
mm,
sincere. And we've got just BS politics on both sides of the aisle, and people kind of going far astray from what the founding principles of the country
mm,
are supposed to have been.
mm,
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic movie. I understand why people think it's schmaltzy and cheesy, but kind of as you said about cliche, you can literally apply that standard to any film, and
mm,
I can point and laugh at whatever makes you cry and say, "Come on, haven't you seen this 100 times before?" I
mm,
also will push back a bit. This is not a completely predictable movie. There are the overarching beats. Yes, you can probably see them coming from a mile away, but there are individual character moments and choices that I think make it specific enough in voice to not be able to write it off.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I was weird. Like maybe it's because I saw it so many years ago. I knew what the ending was gonna be. But even as I was watching it again for the first time, I thought, oh, okay. So this guy, because the whole premise of the movie is that there's this Hollywood screenwriter played by Jim Carrey. His name is Pete Appleton, and he is accused by Joseph McCarthy of being a communist. And during one night when basically his movie gets shut down and pretty much his life, he gets drunk, drives inadvertently off a bridge, wakes up in the beach in this little town, and then everyone mistakes him for this other guy who died named Luke and or Luke Trimble, and they thought that he was him, and he doesn't have a memory of what happened, and then he doesn't know if he's him, and he's later kind of convinced that maybe he is him, but he's never quite sure. And then eventually, when he realizes who he really is, uh, he has to go before Congress and blah blah blah. I knew like immediately it's like, okay, people are gonna find out who he really is, but they're gonna accept him and love him and bring him in as one of their own. And uh, when I kind of just knew that watching it from the beginning, I just went, okay, well, what curveballs are going to throw me here? And like throughout the whole thing, I'm like, okay, well, I know that's going to happen. And here's the thing. Yeah, there are movies with cliches where I think they like, where they use cliches very well. But here it felt a bit like this is Darabont when he went full fluff. It's kind of like if an entire movie was the ending of Shawshank Redemption, where Morgan Freeman meets up with I'm blanking on his name, but whatever. He meets up with Andy Dufresne, and they walk down the beach together. But I mean, I do appreciate a lot of, like you said, a lot of the heart that's behind it. We don't really get classic old Hollywood movies like this anymore. We get very kind of angry, divisive films, and this one is sentimental, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to force its sentiment. It feels like the director actually feels something when he's communicating it, but at the same time, it does feel a little forced with a lot of scenes, and it just didn't hit it right for me.
But it did the first time you saw it. Let's dig into that. Why do you think that is?
I was 13 years old and I saw it in a theater. Now I'm older and a little wiser, and I think the more movies I've seen, maybe that's, I think, one problem with being a critic is that you see so many movies a year. I think I've maybe seen 250 to 300 movies this year, and at a certain point, you feel like you've seen the same movie again and again and again, and it kind of gives you like this numbing feeling where you don't really feel the emotions during certain scenes that you're supposed to feel them. And I feel like because I grew up in that era, uh, I loved those kind of movies, but I feel like those are kind of a thing of the past. And now, if you want to make something that is nostalgic, that is sentimental. It needs to be a little different and not completely beat for beat. Okay, this is what's gonna happen. But I think for a movie that came back in the early 2000s, um, it's serviceable, but at 2.5 hours, way too bloated. And I just wanted something that would take me by surprise in this story, anything at all. And I didn't get that.
You call it bloated. What would you take out?
I would take out like there's that scene where I would cut the jazz scene by half a little bit, kind of.
The piano scene?
Yeah, yeah, the piano scene. Yeah, I would cut that by a little bit. Oh, the opening credits just look terrible. Like they, with the slow flying cars. I have a pet peeve towards opening credits. It's like they rarely work. It feels more like they put it in a movie so then the union guys can be like, okay, I got my name on there. But it's like, it drags on forever. There are other movies with long opening credits that just drive me up the freaking walls. Uh,
Well, I mean, I get it, but that ultimately comes down to a matter of personal preference and has nothing to do with the quality of the film. I mean,
mhm,
if Darabont is indeed trying to make a throwback to a Capra film, I call this a tale of two Franks,
yeah.
Darabont and Capra. I mean, this is, yeah, he's going for it. Like, and they had all of their credits at the beginning of the film. Now, I understand being impatient with it, want to get things going, but I mean, he's staying true to the form. Um, yeah, I disagree about the jazz scene, the piano scene, because I think taking time away from that to set this up, the Peter Appleton character, who is now Luke Trimble, he stumbles into this town of Lawson, sort of reluctantly assumes the identity of this dead kid who died in World War II, along with a number of other young boys from the town. And there is sort of a welcome back party for him in the town square. And his old piano teacher, who was also the concession lady at the
Mhm,
Majestic Theater, she is sitting up at a piano on the dais, thinking Luke was such a gifted piano player and loved playing classic tunes, that getting him up there and playing in front of everyone, that will bring back his memory, looking for kind of a trigger, a positive trigger.
mhm,
I think the beauty of that scene is that he stumbles through it. I mean, Jim Carrey does a lot of work, I think, with each of the characters that he's interacting with as this Pete Luke character, trying to give them what they want because they're so hopeful, realizing that he can't give them what they want, and then also wondering if, in fact, he is this person. And that was a question for me, sort of a mystery in this movie. It could have been sort of almost an Inception or a Memento type of thing, because when we meet Pete in the beginning of the film, we see his life already in progress. He's this bored, frustrated Hollywood screenwriter, but we don't learn anything about his past, whether he has a family or parents. We meet him in the early 1950s, which is when the movie mostly takes place. So, is it possible that he was this person and got amnesia, and then he got double amnesia? And it would have been ridiculous. But for a while, the movie kind of wants us to question, who is this guy on any level. But getting
mhm,
back to the piano scene, I think he has to fumble his way through this, deal with the disappointment from his piano teacher and also the people in the audience. They're all kind of looking away in embarrassment, and almost sadness at this guy, because they don't know if he is who they want him to be or need him to be.
mhm,
And then just that little tickling of the keys, he realizes something in his own past that he can't quite put his finger on. Hey, I can play the piano. I just can't play this classical music. I can play jazz like nobody's business. And that's a real moment where the town kind of comes to life, because they're getting something from him that he hasn't been able to provide them. But he's also disappointing his teacher, because she's like, wait, okay, you can play the piano well, but as we find out later, Luke could never play those tunes. So what is going on here? It adds another layer
mhm.
to this mystery.
Yeah, and then they had the delivery later where you have the one guy who's working in the movie theater, and and he notices that Pete's playing something different, and he defends it right away because the piano teacher slapping his back, saying, "Where'd you learn that?" And he goes, "I taught him it." And
Mhm.
then, of course, later on, you find he tells him that he knew that Luke never played the piano that way, but he was there to help him out, which I kind of saw that. I kind of saw that moment happening. I did,
How?
uh, because how would he? Because I kind of knew when he defended him, and he said, "Oh, I taught him that on the piano." I kind of thought instantly, "Oh, he probably knows something's off, but he's trying to help this guy out instead of trying to, throw him in the fire like anyone else might." Like, I kind of had that inclination. And then when he told him the thing, I'm like, "Oh, here it comes," before he even said it. He's like, "I knew that moment when you're on the piano." Yeah, I guessed it because I'm a genius. No, just because I randomly guessed it.
Yeah, guessing is fine, but I don't think the movie. I don't think there's that big of a clue that that answer is the answer that was ultimately going to be the tip off, because that's a bit of a leap, that he would know that specific fact. I mean, I think it easily reads as he was just jumping in to kind of like help him save face in that moment. It's a nice callback at the end, towards the end when he's gives him that clue, is like, yeah, Luke could play one kind of music but not the other. But that specific idea is a bit weird. Um, I also, speaking of callbacks, I did like the kind of the bookends. It's not a perfect bookend, but it's close enough. The opening screenwriting or boardroom kind of conversation where
Uh,
we just see Pete's face, kind of
mhm.
in close up, and all the executives talking around him, and we
Yeah, it's like
never see
Rob
their faces.
Reiner and Carl
Rob,
Reiner and,
yeah,
yeah, and all those
talking
guys,
about
yeah.
how can we make this script better, and then after 5 minutes of expounding with these terrible ideas, they ask the screenwriter what he thinks, and he
Mhm.
basically says, "I think that's a great idea." And in the end, kind of the same scene once he's gotten his life back, but
Huh.
it's I'm just gonna leave and go back home.
Yeah. And, there is that I kinda like that. I mean, it's a very much like I've never saw Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I'm
Oh,
very
you sh-
curious to see it now because I'm pretty sure it ends almost exactly like this movie. And I know it's one of, Capra's best. Like, the 2 Capra films I've seen is It's a Wonderful Life and Meet John Doe, which a lot of people don't know about, but that one's really well done. And here's the thing that
Wait,
works
is
with
it Meet John Doe or Meet Joe Black?
no, Meet Joe Black's about death. That's with Brad
Yeah,
Pitt, and that's
I thought
3 hours.
that was a remake as well. But
No,
Meet John Doe, okay, I'll have to check that out.
Meet Joe Black actually is a remake, and I saw the original, and the original is very outdated and old, and the remake I actually enjoy, but I mean, man, that movie did not need to be 3 hours, but, I still appreciated it for what it was, and, it was one of those more sappy movies that we don't get it anymore because I think cynical people like me are like, "Oh, it's too sappy, make it darker." Ugh." And then they do, and then we go, "Well, we like sappy movies." And I see sappy movies like this, and I'm like, "That's too sappy." But here's the difference when you get to, let's say, a Frank Capra film compared to this Frank Darabont film, which is Capra. His movies, yes, they are reaffirming about life and all that, but they go to pretty dark places. Meet John Doe is about this person who sends like a suicide sort of post to to a publication for the world to see, and then he has to like make up that he for who he is. They like kind of have this fake identity for this person, and towards the end he almost kills himself, and you really make you think he's going to do that. And then now that I think about it, in A Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart tries to kill himself. And but
I was in a message group a couple weeks ago, and someone had brought up they were watching a bunch of Capra movies, and they realized that a lot of his filmography is about people not wanting to be alive anymore.
Mhm.
So it's not just those two. I guess there's at least one, maybe two other films. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is not about that.
Mr. C just blows his brains out in front of Congress. Okay.
He nearly dies on the floor, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
because he's filibustering for however many days or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, he pulled like a Bernie Sanders when he was up there for like 24 hours.
Cory Booker.
Oh, was that Cory? No, Sanders did the same thing too. I think both of them did.
But
Yeah.
Booker broke the record.
Oh, he did. All
Yeah,
right.
that was earlier
He
this year.
booked the record.
Yes.
But yeah, yeah, but when you get to Capra films, yeah, you got these characters who are questioning why are they even alive, and they kind of realize why they are. But it goes, I mean, when you get to Wonderful Life, when they turn the place into Pottersville and everything becomes like this perverse, sad version of yeah, I'm blanking on names because this is my kryptonite, but on Jimmy Stewart's name, George Bailey's
Oh yeah.
name,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. When you see that kind of version, it's like, damn, man, this got twisted and it feels genuine and kind of like a gut punch. And this movie always just feels a little too light, a little too gentle. Like it would have been nice if they got a little harder on Pete's character, rather than, oh, you're going to testify before Congress and, we know the speech is coming. Before it even happened, I'm like, okay, he's gonna be like, "Can I get a drink of water?" I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of what to say, and then he's gonna, say the, "Oh, fuck you," this is why, this is what America stands for, kind of thing. But when the movie doesn't really feel as genuinely like, oh, I'm going to show you something or kind of give you something that feels real and tangible, and then I'm going to lighten it up, and make you understand why these dark things happened and why there's light at the end of the tunnel. Here, this movie feels like it's trying to replicate what Capra's doing, but it almost feels too much like a derivation, almost like too much like a like if Tarantino loved Frank Capra, and like it almost feels a bit like it would have been that.
If if Shawshank and Green Mile were not a thing, I would probably agree with you. But I mean, this is in Frank Darabont's wheelhouse. He makes these classic
Mhm.
films that are set in the past. I mean, I think both Shawshank and Green Mile were in the 30s and 40s, maybe a little bit later. But this movie is basically in the 1950s. So he's got a love affair with this time period. At least he did when he made these films. I don't think it's cynical. I think there is a lot of darkness in this movie, but it's masked in sadness.
Mhm.
And that sadness is also overcome by community and a struggle to find joy. And
Mhm.
it's very subtle. But when you look at what this town has gone through, it reminded me a lot of the film Train Dreams,
Mm.
where you've got a town that is sort of isolated from the world, as America was back, before we were kind of yanked into World War II. It's like a small little town in California, some miles away from Los Angeles, but the furthest thing from Los Angeles, apple pie in the windowsill and everyone goes to church on Sunday kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden this war happens. And a lot of young men from this town signed up and went off, and all of them but one came back. And the guy who did come back, he had lost a hand and he was very damaged. So when we see that, and the town didn't quite know what to do with that grief, and the Luke Trimble
Mhm.
represented the closure that they were seeking, because there's the one guy that came back, everybody else had been, buried, but
Mhm.
Trimble was sort of an enigma, and there was like this hope, but you could see that the town had kind of given up that hope, so that when he comes back, that they're rolling out the piano and the grand, all the bells and whistles for him. But when we see those, I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but they're like these little banners with the stars on them that represent
Mhm.
each of the fallen. There's that moment when everybody in the town who had lost a family member holds those up, and you
Mhm.
realize just how much this town had lost. And that also weighs on our Pete/Luke character. Jim Carrey does a lot of heavy lifting in this film, and it might be cynical to say this was another kind of Oscar bid for him, but I will say he put in. Oh, hold on. I think my camera just went.
El
Hold on.
Gato.
Yeah, hold on. Let me try and fix this. Sorry. No, hold on. Come back to me, camera. Well, I'll keep talking while I try and remedy this situation.
Sure.
But oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So I will say, if Jim Carrey was going for the gold, I think he put in a lot of work in order to do it. But I kept thinking, and maybe this is me being pulled out of the movie, and perhaps that's a bad thing, but I kept thinking, I really am enjoying Jim Carrey doing this. Not I'm enjoying this Pete/Luke character, but I was very impressed by Carrey at pretty much every turn.
I was a little mixed on his performance. Are you still there? Oh, uh-oh. Oh, that's the second time this you'll need to connect. I think we just lost Ian. So, oh, there he is. I was just gonna roll a clip while that's
No, I'm back. I just had to kick the tires and light the fires. Sorry.
yeah,
I'm here.
that's okay. It's funny. I was kind of mixed on Carrie's performance in the movie. I felt like he was playing everything a little too soft. Like he's doing that thing where they whisper like all their lines, and he's being like a little too brooding. But sometimes he came across too much, like he was good old silly Jim Carrey. Like when Pete sees his name on the poster in the beginning of the movie, they cut to his face and he like smiles and goes like bobs his head around, kind of like that
Yeah.
classic Jim Carrey thing. Or when he's testifying before Congress, he says that's not in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, and I'm like, ooh.
Well, yeah, because he was trying to yell over the cacophony of people who were jeering him.
No, I get that. It was just the way he sounded. It's maybe because I'm just used to Jim Carrey, but he just sounded too much like he was doing the mask or something when he yelled that line. And Jim Carrey has proven that he's a fine actor. He's fantastic in The Truman Show. He's great in Eternal Sunshine. I felt like he was playing too much of his like character from Eternal Sunshine here, and he is trying really hard. And you could tell he's giving it an A+ effort, but it's just kind of like middling results. But I get why Darabont cast him. You know, you want a likable guy who has a lot of energy that people can kind of gravitate towards. And Jim Carrey, especially at the height of his career, and this is when he started doing the more of the dramatic stuff. He had that kind of persona, and for that character, I think it mostly works. I think the cast mostly works. I really wish that they used a lot more of Brooks in the movie, because he's an actor that we know so well. I'm saying that while I don't know his freaking name, but he's an actor that he's so ubiquitous in Shawshank Redemption.
I'm
And then
thinking
he's
of James Whitmore, right? He
James
plays
Whitmore,
Stan
yeah.
Keller here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Names are my weakness. It really, oh, I've been on a lot of awkward dates. But I wish that was a joke. But yeah, you have him who's just kind of like old guy who reacts to things. And he's just in the movie. And you're like, well, why didn't they do more with him? And then
Well,
get
because he's not in those other movies. This movie,
Shawshank.
no, I'm saying he's not. His character is not in those other movies.
Movies in this movie, like the fake ones, or
you're wondering why they didn't use him more in this film because he was so great in those other movies. Like, yes, and he was great in those other movies, and he's great in this film, but he's playing a different part. In this movie, he is a bit background player, right?
Yeah.
So it's unfair to say they need more of him in this movie because he was great in those other things. This is a different story. This is his own thing.
Right. Then maybe not use him and use someone where people don't instantly go, oh, that's Brooks. But I think that's why they did it.
Well, but movies are for posterity. There are going to be people coming to the Majestic who don't know what a Shawshank Redemption is or have never seen this guy. And they're like, oh, I like that background character. Or maybe they'll watch this and then 10 years later they'll watch Shawshank and be like, isn't that the guy from Majestic? Wow, he's really good in this movie.
Yeah, and I think a lot of except it goes the other way around. People see Shawshank and then they go, "Oh man, I can't wait to see what he's doing in Majestic." Oh, but then you have
Well, but
Martin.
here's the thing. He's great in this movie. I mean, he doesn't have a lot to do, but that's
Mhm.
part of being a character actor. Sometimes you get a juicy part, and sometimes you are just the bit of
Yeah,
the background that makes everything else sing as part of a chorus.
yeah, it's kind of the way it is in Hollywood a lot too. You know, you get these guys who are big actors, and then all of a sudden they wind up on generic crime shows. And then I did like what they did with Martin Landau's character,
Oh, he
Harry
was great.
Trimble. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that. Like this movie did actually have one scene that I thought resonated quite well, and that's when Harry dies. You know, because there's a lot of complex things happening in the scene. He's dying. He thinks he's talking to his son. Pete just finds out that he's actually not who he thinks he is and realizes who he really is. And now he has to hold this dying old man's hand and give him a lie with his parting words. But if you tell him the truth, do you want him to die in more pain and sadness? No. So if lying is on the 10 commandments and this guy broke that commandment, then I guess he'd go to hell, but that's why oh, never mind. I'm not gonna get
That's
into that. Yeah.
that's not how any of that works, Mike.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say, and it's interesting that you that thought that was the best scene in the movie. I think it's one of the best scenes, and I think the truly best scene of the film also involves Harry, and it's when he's talking to Pete slash Luke about reopening the Majestic.
Mhm.
And why would people come back to the movies? And Harry gives this impassioned speech about how people used to line up. They would come here
Mm,
to escape their lives. They said that was it like Chaplin, and he named a whole bunch of other people. They were gods, and the stage was their Olympus. That's
mm,
a powerful line. But I agree, the deathbed scene is great, and it sort of is in line with a deathbed scene from the year before with Paul
mm,
Thomas Anderson's Magnolia with Tom
mm,
Cruise and Jason
mm.
Robards. Um, Tom
Little
Cruise,
different
another.
that scene.
I mean, not it's a father and son having a
Like just
very
the yeah,
tearful, kind of
yeah,
difficult goodbye, right?
yeah.
Different purposes, but also another very powerful scene, also involving an actor who tries really hard a lot of the time and doesn't get nearly the credit that he deserves for the work that he puts into his performances. But I will say it's interesting that you think this is the strongest scene, because it is also riddled with cliches. The
Yeah.
cliche of the deathbed kind of confession, like, "Ooh, do I reveal this to this person, or do I let them
Mhm.
go in peace?" The deathbed family member tearful goodbye. I mean, there are probably three or four things in this movie that we've seen in 100 other movies, and yet it worked its magic on you.
Well, that scene played a little different because I don't because yeah, you had the elements of the lie within the scene and the whole movie's kind of built around that. So
Mhm.
there's a whole lot of emotion behind that scene because, this person is going to die not knowing the truth. But at the end of the day, maybe lying isn't always the worst thing in the world, but it depends on the lie. It's kind of like when you lie to a kid or someone who's ugly, asks them, "Do am I ugly?" You're not going to say yes. You're going to say, "No, of course not." So
Right, but I'm saying what you've just described, I've seen in 50 movies, and
yeah.
including movies that all deathbed scenes in movies, unless they're farcical comedies, are also backed up and packed with a lot of emotion. So again, it's not the fact that it's a cliche, it's the fact that it is a very well rendered cliche.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of the other stuff in this movie that you've seen many, many times didn't work for you, but it worked on me. And I've seen, like you, I see hundreds of movies a year. I'm about as cynical and around to the bend as possible. And honestly, part of this might be because I've heard such bad things about the Majestic.
Mm.
But I really doubt. I'll just go out and say I think the people who are trashing on this film at the time were probably just 9/11 cynics,
Mm.
and since then are just folks who've kind of forgotten how to open themselves up to a sincere, well-crafted movie. There's not I can understand if this felt like corporate, cynical Hollywood product. And perhaps the only reason I know that it's not is because I know the director's filmography, which again, I'm undermining my own point from a few minutes ago about this is the movie and it's not those other films. But there's just the scene in the congressional hearing where Trimble or Pete, I guess, stops and asks for that water. The photography, the lighting, the sound design of that pitcher of water as he gets it, and then the flash bulbs all going off. I don't know what was going on in that scene, but it is art. It's not just, oh, he reaches down, gets a pitcher of water, and people are taking pictures. There's a lot of emotion. It's like he is that is representing his inner struggle of all this stuff and this noise going on. He's trying to calm himself because he does not know what he wants to do. He doesn't know if he has the courage. And I will tell you, I'll go a step further in artistry. I was taken aback by the moment when he takes out Luke Trimble's, it's not a Purple Heart, but it's another medal for
Medal of
bravery in
Honor, I
war.
think.
Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
He takes that out and he holds it up to the panel. And it reminded me of every vampire movie I've seen where you take the cross out and hold it up against the vampires, because that's exactly what they were. And that silences all of them. Like everybody in the room is like, and that it worked on me. And he used that as sort of the medal, the crucifix of his conviction, to take that moment to say, yeah, this is all wrong. And there are people, this Constitution, this is not, and the Bill of Rights, they're not just a contract written on a piece of paper that can be renegotiated at any time, which is what his cynical manager said to him. It's a living document that has to be decided to be preserved by us, and it's fought and paid for with the blood of our boys. That's powerful stuff. Now, yes, we've seen impassioned speeches before, but as Gene Siskel once said, it's not what a movie is about, it's how it's about it. I think the writing, the screenwriter in this film, I know he and Darabont were friends, Michael Sloan. I think the prose that he puts into these characters' mouths is aces.
Well, one thing I will say that I like, although I don't quite agree on the congressional scene, it felt like every kind of big rousing ending speech scene you see.
Well, but here's a question. Do those work? Do any of those ever work for you?
Yes, they do. And that's why they were a big thing.
So I guess my question is this a bad scene, or are you just bored because you've seen it 1,000 times in other places?
Two reasons. Because I am bored, and I think Frank Darabont is capable of being a little more clever than that. Because
but here's a question. Why does he need to be clever? You keep coming back to this idea of like, this needs to be different. It needs to be more. Why? We've established this is a nostalgia piece. And nostalgia, if it's done well, is not just, hey, look, we got cars from the 1950s. It's also replicating, as we mentioned, the opening credits of this film, the style, the feeling of being transported back to the time and place that you're trying to evoke. And they didn't have like 1,000 different plot twists in those movies, and not everything was dark and cynical and about the human condition. Sometimes it was a very simple story, possibly a goofy one about a guy who loses his memory and is on the run from being a communist, and he stands up for the truth, justice, and the American way at the end. And that's exactly what this movie is.
Yeah, it does uphold to the American values that we hold dear. And I think its themes are communicated clearly. And I suppose the issue I have with the movie is that it takes a lot of cliches, and at times it uses them effectively and in new ways. Because I agree, I think cliches exist for a reason. It's because real life is sort of like cliches, like everything sort of happens to us here or there. It's the same thing that happens to us. So when we see it in movies, it reminds us of our lives. And when we have cliches that are used again and again in movies, it's not because they're just cheap narrative devices. It's because naturally that's how one thing would go from A to B. And also it's an effective way to reach other people because those things have happened to them in some extent, or they can relate to that. I feel like it kind of took these cliches, and some things like the deathbed scene was different enough where I could really get into it. when you get to the congressional speech, just like movies like Good Night and Good Luck, which admittedly is a completely different film, still kind of handled the Red Scare in a more original manner. And in this one, it's like I get that okay, other filmmakers can do cliches, and just because this is Frank Darabont, it doesn't matter whether it's Frank Darabont or Stanley Kubrick or Steven Spielberg. You know, the idea is that you generally get an effective story. Here, it just felt like everything was just staged a little too much. Like Darabont's style I really think works great for those prison movies because you don't see kind of like operatic prison movies the way he makes them. And when you get to a lot of the scenery in this movie, it feels like characters are just standing in place so the camera can hit its mark, so it can hit that emotional beat with the music. And it feels like, yeah, it might be genuine, but subconsciously it's a little factored in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't understand how that's a criticism. I mean, if you look at the movies that he is trying to evoke, they're not full of, flashy staging and camera work. The other movies that we're talking about, Shawshank and Green Mile, those were adapted from Stephen King's novels, and those have a very particular staging and feel to them, and more of an urgency as far as doing something fancy with the camera work. I'm thinking now of the electric chair scene from Green Mile.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Which one? There's like 3, isn't
It-
there, or 2?
it's
I can't
the
remember. There's the one
it's
where the dude gets, like, burned because
it's
he
the
didn't
one
wet
with
the
the
sponge,
was
and
it the
then the
coffee
ending.
death scene with the sparks? It's kind of the iconic one where the sparks are coming down. I don't remember. It's been a
That
while since
was
I've seen it.
a couple because I know, there was that one guy who, like, didn't wet the sponge, and he was just like a
Yeah.
psycho who worked for them,
Hmm.
and then, you got the very end when John Coffey dies. That's, like, one of the saddest death scenes ever. Oh my god. Frank
Yeah.
Darabont is a master of death scenes, but, if you heard a little bit about his past, it's like, you've been through shit. So, yeah, he can probably understand that feeling of loss really well. I had to say, although I'm mixed on Kerry's performance, even his congressional speech, he gives like one of the most convincing, I'm nervous, I don't know what to do kind of moments I've seen put on film. Because when he's reaching for that glass and he's drinking it, and when his voice is quivering,
Hmm.
he looks like he's visibly shaking, and it doesn't look like he's fake. I mean, he probably would have been. They're like, okay, Jim, shake it, okay, boys, and then he did it, and then but then even in his voice, he doesn't know what to say. He's kind of like holding his head a little bit during
Yeah.
some of the takes. It's like, oh, these are like the
It's when what's
mannerisms of
it's
real
when he's
people when
yeah,
they
it's when he's reading the Constitution. He does
yeah.
that bit where he's kind of quivering because he's not, he's going all the way out there to on the ledge, and there's no going back. And I do like the scene because he storms out of that hearing.
Yeah.
There Hal Holbrook is slamming his gavel, and everyone's all a titter, and he's driving away in his car, and he's like, "Well, I got to go home and pack because I guess I'm going to jail." And the attorney starts talking to him about how he's probably not going to prison, and he
Mhm.
explains the kind of the political and media implications of what he did in that hearing. It is kind of brilliant, but it's the moment where the lawyer says that the name that he had given up kind of unwittingly at that trial
Mhm.
was an old college girlfriend, because this whole thing
Mhm.
stemmed from him having attended a
Yeah.
communist meeting in 1945
Yeah.
in order to impress a girl, and that
Yeah.
girl's name ended up on the list. And it
Mm.
turns out that she had given him up months before his initial run-in with the FBI or whoever
Yeah.
it was.
I
The-
just
ju-
kept thinking I'm sorry.
I was just
Yeah, he was
thinking, like,
horny.
yeah, that was very funny. And
Yeah.
but Carrie's performance there, I think, was great, because after all that he's been through, he still has that ability to have his illusions shattered. He felt kind of betrayed and bewildered. He also felt bad that this girl that he knew in college had also been caught up in this thing, because
Mm.
even though he had followed her to that meeting and wanted to impress her, we as the audience never find out if she was also just there because it was a cool thing to do, or if she was a true believer in communism. And going back to the point of that, hearing, it doesn't matter if you're a communist. You can be a communist in America. You can hold those political beliefs. Now, the whole Red Scare thing is an entire different can of worms, and Joe McCarthy was a madman. But the truth is, especially things that have come out in the ensuing decades, there was a real problem with the Soviet subversion. So it's a very tricky thing to approach. But yeah, you can believe whatever you want. It's what you do with those beliefs that can get you into some real trouble. And I think that is also one of the, as I mentioned, this movie was a few years too early. I think if it had come out in 2004, 2005, when there was real talk about, or probably 2003, 2004, leading up to, some of the unfortunate adventures over in the Middle East. And I guess we're involved a little bit early. It's been almost 25 years, so my chronology gets a little bit fuzzy. But after 9/11, we decided to invade Iraq, and there was a whole Afghanistan thing. And if you spoke out against the war, horrible things were said about you, the whole Dixie Chicks thing. So this movie, I think, would have done gangbusters in you mentioned Good Night and Good Luck. That was 2005. That was hearkening back to the McCarthy era and trying to draw parallels between that and the Bush administration, what was going on there. If this movie had come out along, in that same time, it could have been a double feature, and I think probably would have been better received.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think people might have liked it a little more, especially with the whole Iraq fallout. Because,
Two things that I think were kind of goofy, and one is, I'll give you, and this is not the fault of anybody involved in the movie. It's just an unfortunate coincidence. What you mentioned, Pete, our Jim Carrey character, gets drunk and almost drives off a bridge, which I thought was a really nicely done, intense scene in the rain with the car slipping and everything.
Until the CGI car falls, and you see that 2001 CGI.
Well, I mean, the impact didn't look CGI.
I think I know where you're going with this, but I had the same question, I think.
The Mask?
No, I
okay.
was gonna say, how was he not horribly injured? Because that car got mangled up, and how did he just wash ashore?
Well, I mean, we don't see that. He did. Took a nasty bump on the head, and he washed up. The car being mangled, I mean, that was several.
Oh wait,
months.
It was
carried.
Washed it.
Yeah, but the thing that I thought was unfortunate is in The Mask, which came out 6 years before this, or 7 years, 1994. There's a scene where Stanley Ipkiss, the Jim Carrey character, he's, I think, in his car, is walking with it in the rain because it's broken down, or he's walking with it, and all of a sudden it starts to rain. He's like, "Oh, come on!" That's almost unintentionally replicated in this scene, especially because The Mask had that whole 1940s, 1950s kind of cartoon aesthetic that we get a little bit here.
And the Truman Show, it like rains on him and he walks away, and then they have to like move the hose a little bit.
Yes. The other thing I thought was kind of weird, and I saw this in another film recently, and I couldn't pinpoint. I have to go back and find my notes on it. But it was another movie that took place earlier than Vietnam, but which had Vietnam attitudes towards World War II. And we get a bit of that in this movie, where we haven't even talked about Laurie Holden, who plays the Adele character, who is the Luke Trimble's girlfriend / fiance, who got left behind when he died in the war. But she develops a relationship with Pete as Luke and all this other stuff. But later in the film, when she's talking about heroism and he's talking about how he's essentially an innate coward, he says that when the war started, he did his best to hide. He did not want to go off and fight because he didn't want to end up, I think he said, like this, and he kind of like points around to the graveyard. Sure, maybe the movie is trying to be different, but in most World War II narratives, in the movies and in real life, the attitude was, if you were a young, strapping, able-bodied young man, you ran to those front lines once we were attacked. So that whole idea seemed a bit like Darabont was trying to comment on the Vietnam War a bit, and like it's a different generational attitude towards conflict.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm sure there were a lot of people in World War II who didn't want to go, who didn't want to die. Not like every single American wanted to go. So I can
Well,
understand.
yes,
Yeah.
but if you're talking, but here's the thing, you need to kind of draw a point of drawing that contrast in the film, because at least pop culturally, that's not the attitude. The
Mhm.
attitude is, if you weren't running to the front lines to, because it was revenge for Pearl Harbor. It was, it's the same thing that we saw, frankly, with 9/11. People, there was a huge enlistment thing. Now it was a bit different with 9/11 because we had been through Vietnam and the first wars in the Middle East, so people were far more cynical. But back in the 1940s, there was definitely that attitude of, no, this is a bridge too far. We're taking the fight to them.
Mhm.
So to have that just kind of sticking out as a sore thumb, it's like, yeah, this is filmmaker / screenwriter editorializing, and they didn't really get into why he would have thought this way, or why it wouldn't have been a problem for the other people around him that he thought that way.
Yeah,
That's a whole movie. That's a movie in itself, frankly.
yeah, I mean, the whole movie about Pete trying to avoid the war, is a whole thing. I feel like that's the screenwriters kind of simplifying it, because they want him to say, within a quick instance, "Oh, I'm actually a coward, and I'm not," because we know leading up to that, he's going to say, "Well, now I'm going to do the brave thing because I've always been a coward. I'm going to be more like Luke." Which is why this community isn't going to end up. Well, that wasn't his goal, but that's why the community ended up bringing him back in. It was nice to see a movie about kindness and compassion and community, that it didn't feel too forced. And we don't see a lot of movies with that kind of message anymore. It's more about, how much you hate the other person or how stupid they are. And, this movie was about people actually supporting each other, which was pretty nice. We don't see a lot of that. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. This movie's kind of apropos now because we are facing maybe the extinction of movie theaters in a few years. I hope not. But now with Netflix buying Warner Brothers, the theatrical window to movies is going to get much smaller. And it just seems like inch by inch by inch, they're taking away a little more of that movie magic. And it's nice to see a movie that's about the magic of movies, but it's like old cinema. And it's not like, although I enjoy Last Action Hero, it's not like one of those like crappy cinema parodies or knockoffs or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that the Netflix thing is that's like a 3-hour show, but
Yeah.
it'll be very interesting to see how that all pans out. I mean, especially because Warner Brothers had a spectacular year, so I think a lot of people like lay people are just like, wait, why wouldn't Warner Brothers need to be bought by anyone?
Yeah.
Especially considering the year that they had. But there's a lot of behind the scenes backroom stuff that we're not even privy to. So again, we'll see how it shakes out. But one thing I wanted to say, getting back to the idea of community, that I really liked what you had said there, is this movie is not one note in its treatment of the people of Lawson, because everyone welcomes Pete / Luke back with open arms, except for, what's his
The
name?
guy missing a hand.
Bob. Yeah, Bob.
I was going to say missing an arm, but it's a hand.
Yeah. And he is, he's not convinced that Pete is Luke. He's insecure about his injury because he's got a crush on the lady who owns the diner, Mabel, but he doesn't think that, she would see anything in him. But there's a scene where he confronts Luke in the middle of the street in the night. It's just the two of them. And he says, you know how you sometimes just don't like people? I never liked Luke. We never got along. There was not a big thing like, oh, he bullied me or I bullied him. It was just, sometimes people just rub each other the wrong way. And I'm trying to think of another film or TV show where someone has just come out and said that. Except for Star Wars, the cantina scene. Like, he doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
Yeah.
and it's such a genuine human thing that we don't see. There's always got to be a reason or an inciting incident. No, some people just don't get along, and they carry that negative feeling towards them forever until something turns them around. Yes, it's syrupy that at the end Bob is in the diner and he's watching, like everyone else in Lawson, this congressional testimony, and he kind of says I like that he says he's not necessarily rooting for Pete. He's rooting for what he's talking about. And at the end, there's a kind of a grudging, like, there's a, yeah, we can be friends. There's a bit of a smile, but it just kind of circles around that cliche while still giving us what that cliche is meant to give us.
Yeah. Yeah. And if Ryan Johnson directed it, he would have like reached for his hook and would have shook him, and then he would have accidentally yanked his hook off and would have fell on the ground. But it is kind of like, the more you talk about, the more I'm very easily persuadable, by the way. But I am starting to, because I kind of had I think the opposite reaction with the last movie we were talking about on your show, where I started to dislike it more the more we talked about it. And this one, I'm starting to like it a little more. I kind of wish we would have something that would make us feel like some sort of sense of optimism again, because this year, like, I'm going through my top 10 movies this year, and they're just like freaking downers. Like, got one battle after another: Hamnet, Eddington, Marty Supreme's even a downer, Train Stories, Long Walk. Like, oh my god, it's just like everything's just depressing and sad. But I always said I like depressing movies, and this has been a solid year for films. So,
yeah, I mean, there's other stuff that there's lighter fare. I mean, my top 10 list, which I haven't written yet because I haven't seen everything, I still have some catching up to do. It's probably some eye rollers on there, but it leans heavily in the opposite direction. There's a lot of optimistic, I think, great movies out from this year, including F1, including The Life of Chuck, which I think is
it's on mine too. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a balance. Going back to Star Wars, there's always the light with the dark.
Yeah.
I would even say it's a dark movie, but I love the performances and where it came out. A Companion, a movie that nobody talks about. I think Sophie Thatcher gives an amazing performance in that film. And even though it's a completely messed up movie, it's got a twistedly kind of happy ending with a full character arc. And that character is a sex doll. Spoiler.
Okay, yeah, because every time I try to read the description of that movie, they don't tell you what it is. So now I know, sex doll.
Well, I'm sorry I spoiled that for you. It's still really worth checking out. It is one of the best films of the year, and it's also violent and weird and very funny too.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, when it comes to horror movies, I don't watch them as much as I should. But
It's not
is it horror or
it's violent.
Yeah.
And it's graphic violence in certain places, but it's not really a horror movie. It's more of a technological thriller that's ripped from the headlines, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not like a stalk and slash movie, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So, I think I said everything I could say about the Majestic, other than please keep theaters alive, for the love of God. Out of how many Guinnesses, what would you give the Majestic out of 4 Guinnesses?
Out of 4?
Yeah.
I'm going to give it 3 out of 5, but it's a qualified 3 out of 5 because my heart says 4, but I feel like that's sort of a recency bias. Like, I just watched it. I'm very high on it. So if and when I watch it again, I'll be like, maybe, but yeah.
I was going to go with a 2, but you convinced me to go with a 2.5, because this movie, there's a lot of ideas that almost completely work and some that don't. I just feel like with a little more refining, it really could have, and a little less like easy classic Hollywood shortcuts, it really could have cut through to me. But at least, you know what? At least it's movie that Frank Darabont did that was different than his usual like depressing movies about prison. Although like Shawshank Redemption is kind of like the happiest movie about prison in a way. Like everyone's like raping each other, but at the same time they're like, "Oh hey, buddy," and it's just kind of weird that way. But yeah, and you got, but then he like goes back to horror after this. He made The Mist, where everyone remembers the ending for The Mist. The rest of it's pretty good.
Yeah.
The CGI monsters in it looked terrible back then. So I don't know even how much worse they'd look today if I rewatched it, but I saw it on a rental from Blockbuster at the time. So
It
Yeah.
does not hold up, especially. I mean, the movie holds up, but this is one of the rare cases where I could say someone needs to George Lucas that thing and get in there and give it some like modern CGI, because they even did a black and white version of it, which you can find on the Blu-ray.
yeah.
Which I think was Darabont's ultimate like vision for it. It's kind of like George Miller with Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh yeah.
But the problem is the black and white looks great, but it makes the CGI look even worse. It's like South Park levels of horrid.
Oh my god, I thought it would make it even like better because it would hide. Like, oh my god, that's so unfortunate.
It looks like you're watching an old movie and then 2008 low budget CGI graphics get dropped into it.
Oh my god. Actually, I want to watch it more now, but I don't know. Like, it would be funny if they added like the shitty CGI like monsters like during the effective ending, so you just see those in the background while the Punisher's just losing his shit. But yeah, terrible. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this magical movie, The Majestic. If you like what you listen to, please subscribe to YPA Reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or on YouTube at YPA Reviews, or on TikTok at YPA Reviews Chicago. And for Ian, go to kickingtheseat.com or kickseat.com. I don't know. I got the link in the description. Click on that and you'll go to there. Like, it's not that hard. All right, you can go there and check it out. But Ian, thank you so much for coming on. All right, I guess I got to go back to. I guess I only got 2 more movies left this year, so
Which,
thank God.
do you know what they are? Have you lined them up, or are you still trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I got them on my schedule here. The Housemaids is Paul Feige, so and then
Oh, is that the
Anaconda.
Sydney? Is that the Sydney Sweeney thing?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I have no idea what that movie is about. I'm curious, but I don't know how curious. And then I'm curious about Anaconda. That could be
Yeah.
fun.
yeah, it could be good. I'm not a big Jack Black fan. Like, he seems like a nice guy, blah blah blah, but just like all his acting is always like, I'm gonna scream and then sing something random, and that's like every performance of his.
That's a perfect summation.
Yeah.
But no, I wanted to thank you, Mike, for however we decided on this movie. I think it was you recommending it in a conversation, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that I was able to check this blind spot off. I'm glad that I really enjoyed it, and I'm even gladder, that's a word, that we got to talk about it. So thank you.
I'm glad too, I'm not a communist, or am I? No, but guys, thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, you know where to go. I told you that already. So, all right, we'll see you next time. Whenever that. Oh, I think I know what it's going to be. It's going to be next Tuesday, and we'll see what time. But we are going to talk about one of the best Christmas movies ever made, Eyes Wide Shut. So everyone, please stay tuned for that, and we'll see you later. And that movie's horny too, just like Pete was.